rampant truancy, fake anti-white professor busted, and transgender athlete with a twist. This ain't your mama's podcast. It's the Chico de Manuel Show. Let's get it. You know, when I look back on my life and the time I've wasted doing stupid shit, there's one activity that I've spent hundreds, maybe thousands of hours on. And when I look at it now, I couldn't ever really see myself ever doing it as me today. And that thing is playing video games. As of right now, my stance on video games is like they are lame. It's an activity reserved for virgins and people who don't go outside and have no desire to feel the inside of a vagina. And I just gotta want to talk about that shit a little bit because I just find it kind of bizarre, especially when I see these video games now, how repetitive they look and how uninteresting and how linear they've become and how everybody just hops on a bandwagon of whatever's popular right now. All these games are filled with microtransactions, which simply water down the experience or turn it into something that's pay to win. And, you know, I'm essentially putting all these hours and putting all this work in on the game where somebody who's a Twitch streamer who's sponsored to play the game or somebody who just simply has more disposable income and they decide to use it all on this fucking game because, as I said, the premise of vagina doesn't interest them. Now, I have to suffer a humiliating and embarrassing ass defeat over and over and over again, or I've got to dedicate thousands of man hours into a fucking video game. It's really sad. And like my best boy, my best friend of pretty much my whole life until recently, I've been talking to this nigga again, but I've known this nigga like pretty much longer than I've known. Only people I've known longer than him is family, like mother, grandmother, dad. Like, you know, like this is probably like the first friend I've ever had. And he's like 10 months older than me. And this guy still plays video games daily. Like it has not worn off a bit for him. And at one point in our friendship, I asked him, I'm like, bro, like, how the fuck can you still sit here and play video games? Like, don't you have a yearning, a calling? Like, don't you feel some type of desire, some type of urge to, like, get out, see the world, and, like, become something and, like, experience something? And I kind of looked down on him for a little while, like something was wrong with him for that. And then he basically cut it to me, like, it's not a problem over here. Like, you see it as a problem, you know? But over here, everything is good. You know, over here, everything is fine. This is done. And I thought about it, and I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. Well, if it's not a problem to you, and you do that shit healthily within your own faction, with your circle, your premises, or whatever, fine, whatever. Like, I don't really have a desire to play video games. I don't really have an interest to talk about video games anymore. It's not real. It's just not real, and it doesn't serve me. Like, whatever little dopamine rush I get, okay, yeah, I had some success in the video game. Like, sometimes I wish I could run that good and have that kind of success, like, in life, you know? Oh, sorry, I got distracted. I just want to have that type of success in life. I don't want to just be fucking crushing it on the video game, but then, like, can't get a girlfriend, like, can't buy a house, can't do any kind of substantial shit that actually matters. So it made me think, like, I did a report on this shit in like 2011 about video game addiction because I was probably suffering from it and very much aware of it at the time. But I did a report on it, and that was in 2011. Now it's 2023. I just went to Google. I just typed in stats on video game addictions. Like, I didn't want to be like biased or anything and be like, oh, do people at this age or are video games more addictive than others? I just want to know like stats, just straight unbiased stats from somebody else who did the work and not me. This is from the letter M Power Wellness. I guess it's supposed to be like so like if you got video game addiction, like you call them and they help you out with video game addiction. So they got some stats. It's 49 video game addiction statistics, most addictive games, key video game addiction statistics to know. And I'm gonna just read through a lot of them, and then I'll comment on them at the end because that seems to be the better way to do that. So, there are over 2 billion people in the world playing video games, with the number expected to pass 3 billion sometime in 2023. Up to 4% of gamers are currently addicted to playing video games. I already did the math on that number. It comes out to 135 million people. So that would be 135 million people are addicted to playing video games. In a 2021 evaluation, it was found that the worldwide prevalence of gaming disorder is 3.05%. There are around 60 million people that currently have gaming disorder. I didn't even know it was called gaming disorder. That's new to me. Between 0.3 and 1% of people in the general public have symptoms that are commonly found among people with gaming disorder. 49% of adults in the United States have played video games, yet just 10% consider themselves to be avid gamers. Studies reveal that men like to play video games more than video do. They meant to put more than women do, but they put video do. It's weird. Dopamine rises in humans that play video games. However, 90% of people that play games don't take part in behavior that can negatively damage their health. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a 39% increase in the worldwide average time spent gaming. Symptoms associated with ADHD are closely connected with different levels of video game addictions. In 2019, the worldwide prevalence of gaming disorder reached 3%. In the United States, the average time that someone spends playing video games is 7.71 hours each week, which I did the math on that also. So if you just take that off of 1 day in a 40-hour work week, let's just round it up to 8 hours. That's 1 day off of a 5-day work week. So in a year, if you're just making $15 an hour, that costs you $6,300 a year to sit around and play video games for 7 fucking hours a week. That's ridiculous. Between 0.3 and 1% of the general public display signs of internet gaming disorder. During the 2020 lockdowns, about 30% of British people skipped eating food and showering just to play a video game. On weekdays, Chinese children aren't allowed to play video games for longer than 90 minutes. Wow. This actually seems like a pretty good policy. In 2019, the worldwide prevalence of gaming disorders grew by 3%. Prevalence rates were found in numerous studies that were done between 2009 and 2019, whereby 226,247 people from 17 to, they didn't set the maximum age, took part in or I guess 17 on up, took part in the survey. Alternative studies put the prevalence of gaming disorders at 1.96 instead of 3%. Men are more likely to develop a gaming disorder than women, where current rates are 2.5 to 1 for men over women. At the beginning of 2021, the average amount of time Americans spent playing video games was 7. They put that on there twice. Yeah, they totally put that on there twice. China has the largest average time spent playing video games, around 12.39 hours a week. Wow. Okay, so that's what? We said 8 hours. So that's like 4 more. So what's a quarter of 6,300? That's like about 1,500 more. Like, so that's like still a lot of money to just play games. The Vietnamese gamers spend the second most time on video games each week, averaging 10.16 weekly hours. The worldwide average is 8.5 weekly hours. Based on statistics in 2017, there are more than 22% of American gamers spend between 61 and 80% of their time playing video multiplayer games online with a personal computer. Between 90 and 99% of American kids play video games. There's between 48% and 58% of young adults engaging with video games regularly. The average age of a person that's considered a gamer is 35 years old. Wow. The average The average age of someone with a gaming addiction is 24 years old. Most gamers are between the average age of 18 and 34. 8% of kids and adolescents that are younger than 18 throughout the world could be addicted to playing video games. The prevalence of video game addictions for teenagers has risen 4% since the year 2007. That's actually ridiculous. So they show a picture here, the most addictive video games revealed, and the number one game is Rocket League, which is the game I probably spent. That was the last game I played before I stopped gaming. And I know I had at least 550 hours in that shit. And like I'm looking at these pros, and they've all got thousands and tens of thousands of hours. Like I just cannot. I just can't. I'm not willing to go that far simply to compete with some little kid across the planet I don't even know. Next game I used to play was Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. I played that a lot, but that game was just way too fucking hard. It was way too realistic for me. I wasn't the one. Call of Duty Black Ops, I didn't really play that. Okay, just read through this a little bit more. It says Rocket League is considered to be the most addictive video game currently, with 14.53% of reviewers deeming it addictive. They just pretty much list out the list, but yeah, I don't care. Which video game genres are the most addictive? Our findings revealed that social simulation games like The Sims were the most addictive. Social simulation, 5%. MOBA, multiplayer online battle arena, 3.58. Sports, 2.96. Action role-playing, 1.28. Survival, 1.12. And MMORPG, 0.82. FPS, tax shooter, battle royale, action adventure, all 0.75% or lower. Different games vary in their addictiveness. MMORPG are the most addictive, with 21% spend playing 20 hours each week on the game itself. Holy shit. MMOR games, 19%, RPGs, 18%, shooters, 16%. 67% of white non-Hispanics play video games. 15% of gamers are Hispanic. 12% are black in America, and 5% are Asian. Which age group is most addicted to gaming? The group most at risk of getting addicted to playing video games is 18 and 34 years old. Which gender? While reviewing gaming disorder studies, states based on gender, 945 gaming addicts are male, with 6% being female. Although the number of both men and women isn't the same, the majority of gaming addicts will likely be men. Which race is most addicted to gaming? Obviously, it says white non-Hispanics. Which country is most addicted to gaming? Iran has the highest prevalence of rates of video game addiction. 22.8% of people in the world, or in the country, classified as being addicted to video games of some kind. It's also high in the United Arab Emirates. Health department in the country recommends that parents restrict gaming to children less than 2 hours per day. On average, Emirati children spend over 4 hours each day playing games. Holy shit. In a 2015 report, researchers learned that between 56 and 63% of Emirati children spend 3 or more hours playing video games every day or taking part in other activities related to video games shown on their televisions. 50% of all Emirati gamers claim to spend more time playing video games due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In the country, there's also a 15% rise in new gamers, with 40% being female. Most gamers in the United Arab Emirates, between 70 and 74%, play on their mobile phones. Some gamers also play on video games on consoles, PC. Around 91% of Emirati gamers have spent money on in-game purchases within the last 6 months, showing a link between gambling and playing games. Up to 50% in the UAE spent their time playing video games during COVID-19. More people in the UAE watch gaming streams than any other country as well. Nearly 68% of Emirati gamers look at live streams of different people playing games, which could cause various health issues and raise the chances of playing games repeatedly. In a 2020 review showed that 3 and 4% of gamers around the world are addicted to video games, with as high as 60 million people having gaming addictions. How many kids in the U.S. are addicted to video games? As there are 150 million and 231 million gamers in the U.S., along with a 1.96 to 3% prevalence worldwide in gaming disorder, there are up to 6 million people with a gaming disorder in the U.S. alone. What percent of kids are addicted to video games? 8.5% of kids and adolescents that are under 18 throughout the world could be addicted to playing video games. How many hours of video games is an addiction? For video game play to be classified as addictive, one must engage in them for at least 15 to 20 hours each week or more. This amounts to an average of 3 hours each day. That sort of play can cause lasting damage to the health and well-being of their people, including their relationships and productivity. Video games are addictive due to the dopamine they release in response to having a pleasurable experience, which is closely associated with hyper and sexual arousal in adults. If someone experiences hyper-arousal during gameplay, the brain will begin to correlate such activities with dopamine and release it when engaged in the game. This is also similar to someone eating their favorite foods and listening to their favorite music, among other things. So yeah, there's that. This is why you should put that shit down. If you're a grown man and you're like past 22, 23, like it's time to hang that shit up. Put these fucking lame ass video games down and go out and experience the world, man. It's just there's no future in that shit. Courtesy of the Associated Press, by Bianca Vasquez-Tanis. Millions of kids are missing weeks of school as attendance tanks across the U.S. All right, well, that's obviously not good. Let's see here. Okay, Springfield, Massachusetts. When in-person school resumed after pandemic closures, Rosemary Negron and her 11-year-old son both noticed a change. School seemed less welcoming. Parents were no longer allowed in the building without appointments, she said, and punishments were more severe. Everyone seemed less tolerant, more angry, and Negron's son told her he overheard a teacher mocking his learning disabilities, calling him an ugly name. Her son didn't want to go to school anymore, and she didn't feel he was safe there. He would end up missing more than 5 months of 6th grade. Across the country, students have been absent at recreation school reopened during the pandemic. More than a quarter of students missed at least 10% of the 2021-22 school year, making them chronically absent according to the most recent data available. Before the pandemic, only 15% of students missed that much school. Damn. All told, an estimated 6.5 million additional students became chronically absent, according to the data, which was compiled by Stanford University education professor Thomas D. in partnership with the Associated Press. Taking together the data from 40 states that Washington, D.C. provides the most comprehensive accounting of absenteeism nationwide. Absences were more prevalent among Latino, Black, and low-income students, according to D's analysis. The absences come on top of time students missed during school closures and pandemic disruptions. They cause crucial classroom time and schools work to recover from massive learning setbacks. Absent students miss out not only on instruction, but on also all the other things schools provide: meals, counseling, socialization. In the end, students are chronically absent, missing 18 or more days a year, and most places are at higher risk of not learning to read and eventually dropping out. The long-term consequences of disengaging from school are devastating, and the pandemic has absolutely made things worse and for more students, said Eddie Chang. In 7 states, the rate of chronically absent kids doubled for the 2021-22 school year from 2018-19 before the pandemic. Absences worsened in every state with available data. Notably, the analysis found growth in chronic absenteeism did not correlate strongly with state COVID rates. Kids are staying home for a myriad of reasons: finances, housing instability, illness, transportation issues, school staffing shortages, anxiety, depression, bullying, and generally feeling unwelcome at school. I wonder why that is. And the effects of online learning linger. School relationships are frayed, and after months at home, many parents and students don't see the point of regular attendance. For almost 2 years, we told families that school can look different and schoolwork can be accomplished in times outside of the traditional 8 to 3 day. Families got used to that, said Elmer Roden of Communities and Schools of Los Angeles, which helps schools follow up with absent students. When classrooms closed in March 2020, Negron in some ways felt relieved her 2 sons were home in Springfield. Since the 2012 shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut, Negron, who grew up in Puerto Rico, had become convinced mainland American schools were dangerous. A year after in-person instruction resumed, she said staff placed her son in a class for students with disabilities citing hyperactive and distracted behavior. He felt unwelcome and unsafe. Now seeing to Negron there was danger inside school too. He needs to learn, said Negron. The single mom works as a cook at another school. He's very intelligent, but I'm not going to waste my time, my money on uniforms for him to go to a school where he's just going to fail. Well, I suppose you shouldn't do that. For people who long studied chronic absenteeism, the post-COVID era feels different. Some of the things that prevent students from getting to school are consistent illness, economic distress, but something has changed, said Todd Langiger, who helped San Diego County Schools address absenteeism. He sees students who already felt unseen or without a caring adult at school feel further disconnected. Alaska led in absenteeism with 48.6% of students missing significant amounts of school. Alaska native students rate was higher, 56.5%. Those students face poverty and a lack of mental health services, as well as a school calendar that isn't aligned to traditional hunting and fishing activities, said Heather Powell, a teacher and Alaska Native. Many students are raised by grandparents who remember the government forcing Native children into boarding schools. Our families aren't valuing education because it isn't something that's ever valued us, Powell said. In New York, Marissa Kosick said son James lost a relationship fostered at his school, and with them, his desire to attend class altogether. James, 12, has autism and struggled first with online learning and then with a hybrid model. During absences, he sees his teachers in the neighborhood. They encouraged him to return, and he did. But when he moved to middle school in another neighborhood, he didn't know anyone. He lost interest and missed more than 100 days in 6th grade. The next year, his mom pushed for him to repeat the grade, and he missed all but 5 days. His mother, a high school teacher, enlisted help, relatives, therapists, New York's crisis unit, but James just wanted to stay home. He's anxious because he knows he's behind and he's lost his stamina. Being around people all day in school and trying to act normal is tiring, said Kosick. She's more hopeful now that James has been accepted to a private residential school that specializes in students with autism. Some students had chronic absences because of medical and staffing issues. Juan Belina, 17, has epilepsy. A trained staff member must be nearby to administer medication in case of a seizure, but post-COVID-19, many school nurses retired or sought better pay in hospitals, exacerbating a nationwide shortage. Jeez. Last year, Juan's nurse was on medical leave. His school couldn't find a substitute. He missed more than 90 days at his Chula Vista, California high school. I was lonely, Belina said. I miss my friends. Last month, school started again. So far, Juan's been there with his nurse, but his mom, Carmen Belina, said the effects of his absence persist. He used to read a lot more. I don't think he's motivated anymore. Another lasting effect from the pandemic, educators and experts say that some parents and students have been conditioned to stay home at the slightest sign of sickness. Renee Slater's daughter rarely missed school before the pandemic, but last school year, the straight A middle schooler insisted on staying home 20 days, saying she just didn't feel well. As they get older, you can't physically pick them up and put them into the car. You can only take away privileges, and that doesn't always work, said Slater, who teaches in the rural California district her daughter attends. She doesn't dislike school, it's just a change in mindset. Most states have yet to release attendance data from 2022 to 23, the most recent school year. Based on the few that have shared figures, it seems the chronic absence trend may have long legs. In Connecticut and Massachusetts, chronic absenteeism remained double its pre-pandemic rate. In Negro's hometown of Springfield, 39% of students were chronically absent last school year, an improvement from 50% the year before. Rates are higher for students with disabilities. While Negro's son was out of school, she said, she tried to stay on top of his learning. She picked up a weekly folder of worksheets and homework. He couldn't finish because he didn't know the material. He was struggling so much, and the situation was putting him in a down mood, Negron said. Last year, she filed a complaint asking officials to give her son compensatory services and pay him to attend a private special education school. The judge sided with the district. Now she's eyeing the new year with dread. Her son doesn't want to return. Negron says she'll consider it only if the district grants her request for him to study in a mainstream classroom with a personal aide. The district told AP it can't comment on individual student cases due to privacy considerations. Negron wishes she can homeschool her sons, but she has to work and fears they'd suffer from isolation. If I had another option, I wouldn't send them to school, she said. Yeah, well, that's all pretty fucked up. I mean, I think another part of that is all this wokeness and how liberal the school system has become. There's no tradition. There's no real values. Like, you're not even allowed to say the Pledge of Allegiance because it's like, who want to pledge allegiance to such a racist and country that promoted slavery and blah, 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 blah. People want to go on that soapbox, but they don't really want to, they want to replace these traditions with fucking goofy ass shit like gender ideology. They want to reveal gender transitions to your children. They want to fucking, they want to put all these perverts and weirdos around your kids. They want to have drag queen story time and all this shit. And the school has become so woke and they changing all the teaching models, which worked fine all up until recently. All this like Common Core math and like they tripping about the word slavery being books. Like, it's just too much wokeism. It's too much influence. Like, the schools are designed to educate, not fucking inculcate and indoctrinate. But that's what they do now. So I understand people not wanting to send their children to school, and I understand children not wanting to go. Not to mention motherfuckers shooting up a school every fucking 2 weeks. It's like damn near once a month you hear about another school getting shot up or some kids dying or some SWAT team had to go blow some guy's head off because the motherfucker ran up in the elementary school and started shooting children. Like, what the fuck, man? I do not blame anybody who, for any of the reasons I just mentioned, do not want to go back to school. Like, and then the alternative school, and yeah, it's just not school, but who it really hurts is the people with special needs, like the person with autism that was referenced in that article, who can't get the personalized treatment that they need to help them flourish in the same environment. Like, it's not fair to them. They are the ones that lose out, and they're the ones that need it the most. All because people want these green-haired, thick-rimmed glasses with these females in this eccentric-ass carny folk clothing, putting all these weird-ass ideas in your children's head and just completely ruining the school system from the grounds up. Even letting the fucking trans women be in high school level sports and shit, and collegiate level, college, secondary education, academia is just completely inundated with wokeism. It's not even just about all this COVID and pandemic shit. That's another factor of it. But to quote the great Jordan B. Peterson, it's a multivariate analysis. Like, it's not just this is one reason, but I think the bigger, more prominent and more direct reason is the wokeness and the liberalism of the education system and how schools don't teach as much as they indoctrinate. And they don't want to share the curriculum with parents. Like, the schools treat the parents like the parents have no right to their children. And it's a real bad precedent. And it's completely fucked up the school system in the United States. So I take all this shit into consideration that's in this article. Like, I'm sure those are real life cases. Those are real life impacts. And I don't doubt that shit for 1 second. But I think the biggest culprit is the decline of American culture in these schools and the increase of wokeism and the liberalism of the public education system. It has no tradition. It has no sense of identity. And it's completely gone wacky and woke. And it needs to be distinct. It needs to be extinguished expeditiously. All right. Courtesy of Rare. Opinion by Troy Smith. Anti-white systemic racism guru professor busted for fake data has 6 studies retracted. Well, isn't that interesting? Eric Stewart was a criminology professor at Florida State University. Stewart published studies throughout his career promoting the idea that systemic racism plagues America. Eric Stewart published data claiming that white Americans sought harsher sentencing for Hispanic and Black Americans. Stewart also attempted to blame racism in America on conservatives, particularly white conservatives. Now Stewart is out of a job as his university has fired him over claims of extreme negligence. Turns out Stewart has been falsifying the data for his studies for years, skewing numbers and figures in order to create his own desired outcome. Wow. Florida State University claimed that Stewart was fired over incompetence and false results. 6 of Stewart's false, blatantly anti-white studies have been retracted. His studies were published in many publications throughout the years, including Criminology and Law and Society Review. Though Stewart has been reprimanded for his lies, the damage that his false rhetoric has done to Americans subjected to the academic system has already been done. America is not a racist country. In fact, America was the first nation to fight a war against itself in order to preserve the dignity of all its people. Which is true. Let's see here. America has championed civil rights and has always been on the forefront of protecting human liberty. Those who claim that the idealism represented by American values is anything but a beacon of hope and freedom throughout the world must truly have no concern for the fate of our species. Why do we permit those who have been privileged to live in our great society to tear it down, especially on the basis of false information? Parents across America should be in a constant fight to cleanse their education system of the lies of racial bias. The entire narrative is built on lies. If you're watching the video portion of this, there's a picture of this fucking guy, this black guy who making up all this shit. So let's keep going here. The post anti-white systemic racism guru professor busted for fake data has first appeared on. Okay, so that's the whole article. Well, yeah, about that. First of all, I'm going to display the level of disrespect I have for this guy while eating a grandma's cookie, while I proceed to lambast his ass. So I wish they would have elaborated on what the studies was that was fake. He got fired over incompetence and false results. First of all, it really pains me to see black people in today's society stuck in this goofy ass fucking victim mindset about how the white man's holding them back. It's literally one of the dumbest conversations that I can find myself stuck in. My message to people suffering from that shit is the same thing Michael Jordan said to people in I think the late 80s, early 90s. Stop it. Get some help. Like, I was interviewing my friend yesterday, and I asked her about men that she thought was influential, positive role models for men. And one of the people she said was Dr. Umar. And if I remember that guy correctly, he's like the real extremist, Afrocentric kind of guy. And I think I've heard some of what he says, and I will agree. He does say some good things. Like, he has some good things to say, for sure. Kind of the same way some people feel about Andrew Tate. Like, he has good things to say, but it's like the way he says them, you know. But like, my knock on this guy is like, he still thinks that we're in a culture of white supremacy and that like white people are deliberately holding black people back, when like nowadays everything in society is like pretty much designed to alienate and isolate white people. Especially this whole diversity, equity, and inclusion shit. That is all anti-white propaganda. Now, these people love to go on and on about slavery and all the damage it's done and all the harm it's caused. But they don't like to talk about the fact that there were many white abolitionists during the times of slavery. And a lot of white people that didn't buy into the whole racial shtick, you know, per se. They saw what was happening, and they saw what it was, and they saw that it was wrong. And they certainly risked their well-being as a white person in order to further the cause. So now that the tables have flipped, a couple 100 years later, 100 years or so later, where are the black people that are going to stand up for these white people and call out when shit has gone too far? To a certain extent, I can understand some white guilt, you know, only to the extent that you live in the effects of what your predecessors have caused, and you shouldn't have to. And I find it odd that these people just desperately decide to cling to the narrative of that, like, they can't get ahead in life, or that they'll never equal out, or the white man will never respect. Like, that's such a tired narrative for me. I swear to God, the nicest people to me in my life have been white people. Some of the greatest people who've done, some of the nicest, kindest, most generous, and non-judgmental things for me have been white people. And no, I don't have any kind of ascribed data. Like, it's not like I've kept track of every white person I've met, kept track of every black person I've met, and rated on the scale from 1 to 10 how they all treated me over the course of our interaction. But I've been arrested at least a dozen times, almost exclusively by white police officers. I've had my ass beat by the police once. Hell, I probably only ended up getting taken away in the back of a police car maybe like 3 times in my life. Like actually going to jail. 3-4 times top. But I've had several police interactions. And all these white police officers have been very professional with me. If they was racist, they hid it well. They didn't expose it. I've never had any cop be like belligerent or like, you know. And I've never resisted no police officer's orders. If a cop told me to do some shit, I fucking did it. Because, like, people don't realize in that moment you lose that battle. You don't, Who gives a fuck about your rights outside of the courtroom? Yeah, they'll probably get justice for you. That'll be a month or so down the road or whatever the trial ends if you get one. Like, you know. So, and also, not to mention how many professional, wealthy black athletes, business owners, musicians, artists, all kind of shit. Like they're wealthy. You got black people on major news stations. You got people like Reverend Al Sharpton and shit. Like, how is he oppressed? How is the white man holding him back? The white man really wanted to hold you back. He could just not let you get that shit. They could just go on a life, eternal crusade to stifle and silence you. And you wouldn't even, there would be no BET. There would be no black people on major networks. There would be no black actors. You know? One thing I don't hear anybody complaining about, and my dad was not a man to oftentimes say wise or memorable things. Nevertheless, this is one thing he pointed out, which I see is true to this day. I most recently noticed this in the Netflix series Suits. It's like when it's a black woman in the main role, she's a leading role, she's opposite a white man. Like in portrayal, the white man gets the black girl. Go away, Ushka, go away. And they don't have any portrayals of like black men with black women. Like you gotta actually go to like BET or like OWN or something like that. You gotta actually dig into that box to find that shit. And yeah, that may be true, but what the hell's that got to do with being oppressed or like people lying about shit to like further a narrative? Like this guy changed the results, published 6 studies. I don't know how big like magazines or editorials, criminology, law and society review. I don't know the popularity, the gravity of that popularity, but if they brought back 6 of them, I really would like to see what they said. I really would like to see how gross the hyperbole and exaggeration and made up horse shit is. Like I would kind of like to know firsthand, because if it was actually still happening to the degree that people like to portray it and bitch about it and cry about it all the time, what would be the need for him to fabricate or alter the findings to like lend itself to a narrative if the narrative was self-evident? Like, help me understand. If this is as you say, if black people are still oppressed by systemic white racism and white supremacy, why do you need to falsify a narrative to convince people of that? You should be able to just lay the facts out in front of them and they reach that conclusion on their own. However, this fraudulent ass product of academia didn't think he could do that. Either he knew better, or he didn't think he would be able, or his product wouldn't sound good enough unless he doctored it. I can't think of any other reason. And I kind of don't want to. Because as a black man, I'm not really super Afrocentric and all outspokenly black and all that, but I do not want to further a narrative for black men and black people in general that paints us as victims or makes us seem weak. I think it's a bad business proposition. And I think it's very unbecoming for the race as a whole. Like, it's not becoming of a bunch of people to be constantly complaining about what the white man took from you 60 years ago. Is it always going to be in society to some degree? Yes. Yes. If your goal is the eradication of racism in America entirely, it's a pipe dream. You can't get rid of racism anywhere there's race. As soon as you create race, there's racism. If you're going to give people preference to feel how they want to feel about things. So this is not something that can be eradicated. But fraudulent ass, boo-boo ass professors like this motherfucker making up fake publishings to try to further a narrative that doesn't, quite frankly, exist to the same extent in today's society. Yeah. That's, it's deplorable. And he deserves whatever the fuck he gets. He ought to be thrown in prison for that shit. Do you think black people in America now are closer than they were during the civil rights movement, the Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X era? On the main page, click the link that says leave a voice message, and maybe one day I'll post it on the show. Courtesy of the New York Post by Richard Polina. Transgender cyclist wins female race to prove males are physically superior to women. Has message for trans athletes, quote, they're being selfish. All right. Well, let's dig into this. Born a biological male, one South Korean has continued her passion for competitive cycling after transitioning to a woman against biological female riders. Not for glory, but to prove a point to selfish trans athletes. Na Hwa-rin, 37, was raised in a Christian family, but knew since the age of 7 that she should have been born a female. Well, that begs the question. Following her transition last year, she was legally recognized as a woman in the eyes of the South Korean government and has continued with her lifelong love of racing as a cyclist, now as a female. Na secured a victory at the Gangwon Sports Festival in June, but had an out-of-character reason for racing and winning. She said to prove biological men are physically superior to biological women. All right. Na secured a victory at the... Oh, no. I have no unresolved feelings over winning because it's no longer what I want. My goal was to stir controversy and get my story heard by competing. Na told the Korean Times. Okay? Na, who was born and raised in Chorwon, a city about 40 miles north of Seoul and bordering North Korea, is the first transgender athlete in all of South Korea, and said the win had her feeling more relieved than triumphant. Quote, I am not proud of myself at all. I believe other transgender athletes will feel the same way. They may not want to admit it, but they're being selfish. There is no honor as an athlete in that, she told the outlet. Before her transition, Na had already earned a reputation as a fierce competitor as a male, winning several medals in men's races, some of which took place while she was undergoing hormone therapy, according to the South Korean Times. Wow. Na is not honored by winning the race, but used her moment on the podium to send a message that athletic committees should include a third gender category for transgender athletes. It could be like how we have many weight divisions in some sports. Under the current binary system, women athletes will be discouraged and their hard work might not be recognized due to the participation of transgender athletes. After clinching the victory, the transgender cyclist qualified to compete in the National Sports Festival, which she declined. I don't want to make an issue to the point where I harm other people, the cyclist told the outlet. Na believes making a separate category is only fair to respect biological women athletes and other transgender athletes who wish to compete fairly against others with similar physical characteristics. Trans women athletes, no matter how hard they worked, will never be truly honored for their wins. Honor is a goal that all athletes aspire to attain, but this is a situation where nobody will be honored, and I think that shouldn't happen. As the only trans athlete in the country actively competing, she understands some people may ask, why should they do that for only one person? The cyclist says it can only help others and make it easier for communities to accept a third gender category. Right. If we lower the bar, more will join. The room will quickly fill up if we allow more people to compete in sports and let them live their dreams, she told the outlet. Na, who's an asparagus farmer when she is not training or in competition, reiterated her message for winning the race and what she and others are looking for to pursue their athletic passions honorably. Respect and harmony. Those are the core values of Olympism and sports. Okay. Well, this is a rather unique and different situation. I'm actively trying to gather my thoughts about this because I think I'm kind of riding the fence on this. Like, I think this sounds good remotely because it's like, it's an isolated incident. Not so much the fact that it's a trans woman, transgender cyclist defeating women like harshly at the sport, but like this one has some kind of like moral disclaimer. So like if more people start doing this, I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Because when I really think about it, as I was reading that article, I'm like, when did we not understand that males are physically superior to women? When did we not understand that? When was that like a question? When was that ever in doubt? Like, how is this the $64,000 question or whatever the fucking dollar amount is? Like, we know men are physically superior to women. They have been since, I don't know, forever. Like, I understand that it's supposed to be like this whole moral thing and like, I did it to teach everyone a lesson and you guys are being selfish and I don't want to take too much of this moment. Like, I feel like what you did, if you didn't really want attention, you wouldn't have done it. You went out on a crusade to prove something that's already obviously and objectively true. And while you might have declined to compete in a national competition or whatever, or you might be the only one doing it, I think you defeat your own point. And mostly because that point is already understood for most humans alive with functioning, who aren't confused about binary systems. So I don't particularly buy into this narrative that the transgender cyclist won the female race to prove males are physically superior. That's already been happening time and time and time again. It's already proven. If they're being selfish, what makes you any different? How are they being selfish when they do it, but you're not being selfish when you do it because you got this moral compass guiding you along the way, saying that you're doing it for all the right reasons. I'm doing it for all the right reasons. I'm taking opportunities away from women to show the world that taking opportunities away from women is wrong. Please sit down with me and help me understand how the fuck that makes any sense whatsoever. Any sense. The headline kind of caught me because normally I'm just used to hearing about the trans women, men, DNA men going up against actual women. But this one has a message. This one's got a meaning to it. There's some purpose behind it. This is bigger than just taking opportunities away from women. The article said this person won several medals as a man. So I think the narrative that this is just like a failed athlete that's trying to come over and dominate women, I think that might lend a little bit of credence to it. However, I think the biggest picture here is that this is like it's a double-edged sword. Mainly because you're proving already known knowledge. This is like this whole article is a straw man. Mainly because the only people that are saying that these athletes are superior to women, these stunning, beautiful trans women, DNA men aren't, they're the only ones saying that. This has been known and understood forever. That's why there are men and women's sports. Simple. You didn't prove anything. You furthered a narrative under the likely partial but still definitely guise of fucking morality. And unfortunately, I don't buy it. I really don't. I still think the third gender, any of that. I don't think sports has not had a third gender for as long as athletics and sports has been around, and it's worked just fine. It's worked just fine. So now all of a sudden coming to this conclusion that, we need to make a third gender so I don't get out here and dominate all these women and have to prove this point to y'all. I think it's actually just covert narcissism. And I definitely feel bad for these women losing all their opportunities. It's like every time I open my fucking laptop, I see another story about another trans athlete where this discussion's being had more and more and more. I will concede that the solution to this problem would be to either make a transgender league or to kick them out of sport, keep them out of sports altogether. And I lean toward the latter one. Keep them out of sports. All these people who have this, everything should be open to everyone. No, it shouldn't. No, it shouldn't. Everything should not be open to everyone. Everyone should not have all this equal opportunity, blah, 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 blah. Like, people die every day. They have equal opportunities to live. You gonna go out trying to save everybody's life before they die? And granted, that might be hyperbole, but the point remains. Like, everybody's not gonna eat from the silver spoon. And all this fake ass, all these gestures that's put in place that's supposed to emulate understanding or kindness or tolerance or some kind of shit like that, it's all garbage. Out of all the issues in which transgenderism creates controversy, I think this is the number one most open and shut, easy to find a ruling on issue that there is. Trans women in sports should not happen. Period. Period. And that's just that. That's just fucking that. Hey, that's the show. Thanks for listening. Make sure you tune in this weekend and hear part 2 of 9, Mental Maintenance. It's going to be a good show. Other than that, I got nothing else for you. Thanks a lot. Until next time, I'll holla.